Hi, friends. Welcome to the Mobile Bev Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing mobile bar professionals with the information they need to succeed. I'm your host and fellow mobile bar owner, Sarah Murphy. Each episode, I'll be bringing you interviews, knowledge, anecdotes, or opinions with the goal of assisting you in building a profitable, sustainable, and scalable mobile bar business that will support the lifestyle you dream of. I'm excited for today's episode, so let's get started. I'm here today with Dawn Christian, our COO and Chief Alchemist at Mobile Bev Pros, to talk about a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, which is accountability. We were recently in Denver for our visibility workshop, which in-person workshops are literally our favorite thing to do. We really get to connect with people and have really deep conversations about things that they're experiencing in their business that you just can't capture online, even in some of our group containers. And it was shared with us that a common pain point amongst some of the mobile bar owners is their lack of prior leadership experience. Even those that have had management experience of populations, maybe teachers, for example, haven't necessarily managed other adults, and they certainly have never had to manage where they didn't have some other form of leadership above them that they could lean on. And you and I, Dawn, we love leadership. We're students of leadership. We're practitioners of leadership. We have not only done all the research and done all the reading on it, but we've implemented it with large teams, 50 or more for both of us. And so we've made a lot of mistakes. I'll speak for myself. I made a lot of mistakes. My first leadership position was when I was 18 years old. And the way that I led then is very different than the way that I lead now. And one of the first things when we talk about leadership that always comes to mind is the concept of accountability. Set expectations and hold people accountable. But it's easy for us to say because we know what that means. So today we're going to talk a little bit about accountability and what it looks like to support systems of accountability.
Yeah, and my favorite thing about this topic is that you can't actually hold people accountable. You have to foster an environment in which people want to be accountable. And so it's a little bit of a different reframe when we start looking at things through that lens. That a lot of times when you're first starting out in leadership, you start from a position of like authority, like I'm the boss, you do what I say because I sign your paycheck. And that just doesn't work. It might work until people find a new job, but it doesn't work in the long run. And so this conversation that we had in Denver was really enlightening as to what our next level leaders really need from us, the information that they need from us. And leadership is my love language. It's something that I'm super passionate about. I've been doing it since 2013 with, as you said, very large teams, multi-unit. And so you can't always be on site, right? When you're running multiple 6 and 7 figures, you can't be on site to be managing directly. And so you have to create impact in people's lives that make them want to perform well, whether you're in the room or not. And so I'm excited for this framework that you put together around accountability and to have a deeper conversation with you about it.
Yeah, so I taught a 3-hour half-day workshop on accountability the other day to our Exceed program, which is our more advanced group container for mobile bars that are making over 6 figures and have been in business for at least 18 months. And around that time is when you start to really build a team and you start to transition from being an owner operator to wearing that CEO hat a little bit more. And because you're in the seat of power more, meaning you're working on vision, you're working on managing people, and you're working on managing resources, it requires you to have systems of accountability. And so this 3-hour workshop is really talking about what systems, how, all the good, nitty gritty. But again, that's a 3-hour workshop, and we're trying to keep this to about 25 to 30 minutes if possible. So I just picked one piece of that to talk about today, which is supporting the systems of accountability. So not necessarily exactly what systems to set up or how to set them up, but once you have systems of accountability, how do you support those? And I reiterated this maybe a dozen times. Anyone in the group is probably like, Sarah, you're beating a dead horse at this point. But the very first and the very foundational piece of supporting a system of accountability is first and foremost to lead by example. And that can be really difficult for people who have more visionary leadership perspective, where they're like, well, I'm not necessarily very good at holding myself accountable, but I need everyone else to be accountable to me. And this is not uncommon in with entrepreneurs. One of the reasons we become entrepreneurs is because we want to do things the way we want to do them when we want to do them. But then with our teams, we want them to do the things the way that we want them done. But if we come off as a leader who doesn't fulfill what we say, we don't meet our deadlines, we don't actually accomplish tasks the way that we say that we want them accomplished, we're not consistent in the way that we show up, that is the root and the very essence of the culture that you're building. And so if you want your team to thrive and function within systems of accountability, it starts with the leader. It starts with us actually practicing what we preach.
Yeah, absolutely this. And holding that, the state that you want your team to hold. And so you set the tone, right? And so the energy you bring to the table is the energy that you're going to get back. And so if you go in and you feel hectic and all over the place and you're just like throwing spaghetti at the wall, then your team, they're filled with anxiety. They don't know what's coming. They can't trust you. There's not a sense of safety. And I think you're going to touch on that later, like creating a safe space. But really, as leaders, our job first and foremost, before we start giving orders or managing tasks, is going to be to set the tone. We have to set the right tone. And that's what inspires people to want to work with us. My favorite thing is when I have to have tough conversations, period. That's a full sentence. But my favorite thing is when I have to have tough conversations and people are like, man, you're so calm. Like, you're so good at this. And I think when we think of leadership and managing, we don't actually use it until it's painful. We don't think we need those tools until we have a customer or a team leader or a team member who's bucking us. And they're like, ready to throw bows. And we're, oh God, now I need leadership training, but leadership starts way before that. And you can actually prevent a lot of that mess by just setting the right tone. And then when you have to have tough conversations, people trust you and they know that you're invested in their success. So they receive that from you. So setting the tone is such a huge part of holding people accountable.
Yeah, and since you brought it up, let's move right into the concept of creating a safe space. You and I recently had a client that was struggling to keep good staff and was struggling to hire good staff. And when we looked inside and peeked behind the curtain, it really boiled down to the fact that no one felt safe, and not like physically safe. They didn't feel like they were going to get attacked physically, but psychologically. They didn't feel that they understood what the expectations were. They never knew where the goalposts were. They were walking on eggshells because they weren't quite sure exactly where the next landmine was. And because of that, it created a really difficult environment in order to hold people accountable because there were no expectations. And so I'd love to take a minute to talk about, what does it look like to have an environment where people feel safe?
Man, I would say that starts with being open to receiving feedback. As leaders, it's not a one-way street, and if we want people to receive feedback well from us, we have to create an environment in which they feel safe giving us feedback. And I think that it comes down to having honest conversations when they need to take place. And so, that obviously can't be like in front of a customer or in front of the team, but it has to be timely. And that just shows that there's a mutual respect here and that I'm not going to let you flounder. I'm not going to let you fail. I really want to see you succeed. And so, how can we come together on this? How can I support you better? What do you need from me? What tools do you need so that you feel supported and you feel safe and you feel like you can succeed with this team? And then here's what I also think, you could be doing better. And there is a 4-step system that I love for giving feedback that makes people feel really safe when giving and receiving feedback in the training phases. And you guys can find that in the academy if you're members with us. I can't remember what that lesson is called. I think it's something about delegation, but there's a 4-step method to providing feedback in a way that is really well received and lets people feel safe and supported as opposed to like judged and attacked.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly to that. And I used to start off my orientations with employees and saying that, communication flows both ways. And so I'm going to give you real time constructive feedback so that you know how to succeed here. But likewise, I need you to be able to provide me that same level of transparent communication. That's the only way that this works. Another thing I like to reiterate when I'm teaching on accountability is that most of us are not taught how to properly communicate as we are conditioned by society. We learn how to communicate first through our families, and anyone who has a family probably knows that the way that you communicate with each other is not the way that you communicate with strangers. We tend to not have healthy communication styles with our own families. And then we get put into the workplace, and then we are conditioned on how to communicate with our peers, oftentimes by people who also don't have good skills in communication. So you become an entrepreneur, you're forced to learn how to communicate effectively. I personally was handed a book on how to communicate in the workplace by a manager once, because they're like, you clearly do not have this skill set. And so harsh lessons learned, but I took it as an opportunity, a challenge to learn on how to communicate effectively. And the other thing that I want to mention here when it comes to creating a safe environment is that we need to have role clarity, and in order for people to know what's expected of them and succeed, they have to know where the goalposts are. And oftentimes, if someone is not, and I think you and I maybe have touched on this in the academy for sure, there are three reasons why people don't meet expectations. One is they don't know how, meaning they don't necessarily have the knowledge or the information to do it. The second is they literally can't. They physically can't meet, if you ask me to do 40 push-ups and that's the expectation, it's not happening. Sorry, I just physically cannot do 40 push-ups. And so I can't meet that expectation. And the third reason is because they don't want to. And that's a will situation. And you can't necessarily fix that either unless you can convince them and manipulate them into buying into whatever vision or reason that you have for them to achieve those things. So we always start with assuming the best and assuming that they don't have the information that they need on how to succeed. And that usually starts with role clarity. So job descriptions, training people on exactly what it is that they are supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing it, how they'll be graded, what the expectations are. And then also when it comes to a psychologically, I think, safe environment is being able to communicate and share and be vulnerable in a way that is a space of neutrality, right? They won't be judged or yelled at, or the leader won't take things personally, but that there's this space of neutrality where it's understood that anything that's said is feedback, and you don't necessarily have to take it, but that they're offering it to you because they're in a space where they need to be heard.
Yeah, there's two pieces here I really want to touch on. The first one is take nothing personally, and the second one is around fixing will when you have a will issue. Taking nothing personally is going to increase your ability to lead effectively by 1,000%. Being able to not just even receive feedback when it's given to you kindly, but to also have customers or team members who are irate, who are really pissed off, who are really stressed out, and to not let that mean anything about you, and to be able to weave through some of that emotional repercussion and find the gold, because that's always the goal, is to find the gold. What is this person trying to communicate to me? What do they need from me? And how can I support them? And that way, it doesn't mean anything about me, what they're saying, but also this person is obviously crying out, right? That for something, even if it's something I can't help with, maybe they have something going on at home, but still, like, where can I look at this and offer peace of mind? And then the second piece that I wanted to touch on was around fixing the will issue. And like you said, you can't always do that. But when you can set the tone, people want to perform for good leadership. And a lot of times people don't even recognize good leadership when they see it initially. I know the first time I encountered a really strong leader, she broke me. I thought for sure this woman's just mean. But she wasn't. She was really like setting up expectations and boundaries and structures in a way that I had never seen before. And it felt abrasive because I had never seen it before. But she was always very respectful of me. And she actually saw me in a light that I didn't quite see myself. And so there was like this abrupt shift, but it made me still to this day, if I saw her, if we went out to like lunch or something in Tennessee, like I would still probably try and like prove myself to her, because she's such a phenomenal leader. Like she makes me want to be the very best version of myself. And I think that's how you can fix a lot of will issues when they are fixable, is by being calm, level-headed, and inspiring people with the way that you move in your vision. And then that inspires them to want to move with you in that vision. And then that's the only way that you can really correct a will issue, is just that you hold your own and other people are inspired by it.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like anybody who has eventually become a really strong leader was first broken by a really strong leader. Again, because I don't feel like we are raised or conditioned by society to embody the skill sets that make someone a really good leader. We even have things like great leaders are born, not made. And that's a total falsity. You can be good at things and have really great skills, and you can have the ability to take control in times of pressure. That could be sometimes erroneously perceived as leadership, but taking control is not leadership. Leadership is the ability to get a collective to work towards a common vision. And that is a skill set that is developed. It is not innate. It's why I always like to go back to concepts of leadership in the past, where, like we had kings and queens. They were trained for decades in courts. They watched other leaders, do meetings and have people buy into their political agenda. That was not something that King James was born with, right? And no leader is born with the ability to be a great leader. Those are skills that have to be developed. And in order to do that, someone needs to point out to you all the ways that you're a shitty leader. And that is no fun. It's no fun. And sometimes it's not even a leader that's pointing that out to you. It might be an employee. It might be a team member who's, you are like, man, I can't get this person to do what I want them to do. And you have to look at yourself in that moment. You have to look at yourself and say, what can I do to get this person to get on the bus? And that looks like supporting them in like whatever it is that they need in order to get on the bus. And a lot of people who are teachers or come from a background of parenting, like we have some tools in our tool belt to do that with children, but adults don't respond to those same tool sets. We have to know a little bit more about the psychology of adults in general. And one of the things that I think helps here is providing consistent opportunities for open dialogue. And that's a little bit difficult, I think, in the mobile bar industry, because we don't see everybody all the time. And it's not like we have 40 hours Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 with the team. We can't just schedule a meeting, every Wednesday at 2 p.m. and then the whole team comes together. That's not the world that we live in. And so my recommendation is to have real-time conversations whenever possible. We can't do that necessarily when an event's happening, but we can talk to the entire team prior to events, a little roundup before events happen, and then after events. So events conclude, we're tired usually, we're, cranking to get things loaded up and to get out of there. And it might be easier for you just to be like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll talk to them tomorrow. Whatever. But then tomorrow becomes the next day, and then the next day, and then it becomes, I'll just tell them the next time that I see them. And that delay actually makes things worse, because when you do talk to that person, if it's not in the moment or even the next day, they're going to think you stewed on it, and you're going to potentially work yourself up about it over time, because we have an amazing capacity to do that. So creating opportunity for real-time dialogue or regular dialogue, and not just constructive criticism, but also positive feedback, and just a seeking to understand, wherein you might be asking, that was a great event, or we had great feedback from people about that event. What do you think went well? And what do you think could be improved? And how could we have made that event easier for you? Because then they feel heard, and then they're being invited to give feedback in a safe, neutral space. They're more likely to feel safe giving feedback when there might be an environment where there's a bit more tension.
Yeah, and then they create ownership, right? When you invite positive feedback, you give people a sense of ownership over what they're doing. And so that's a lot different than like being talked down to. And so the other thing around creating this safe space and having opportunity often to have these conversations is one, people want connection. And I think leadership, I think the difference between being a leader and being a manager is that a manager just delegates, throws out tasks, and a leader takes the time to connect with people. And that means holding space for going deep when it's necessary. That doesn't mean every conversation. I love going deep. Everybody knows that about Dawn. But like, I don't mean you have to go deep every time. But people lack that. We lack a certain depth in our society today that when they see a good leader who is willing to have tough conversations, both positive and negative with them, and who's willing to go into the deeper layers of why things work the way that they do, people really appreciate that. The other way that you can create a safe space for feedback is to never assume that you're right. Even if you're hell bent and you're like, no, Dawn, that's how the glasses go. That's how I want them stocked. Yeah, but maybe that person's left handed and it doesn't work for them. Right. And when you go in and you just attack because you didn't put the glasses out the way that I wanted them out, now they don't feel safe to tell you that it's really inconvenient for them because they're left handed. Right. And so then there's miscommunication. We have a violent communication and they just walk away pissed off. You walk away pissed off. You feel like they were incompetent and they're not. They have a reason for doing things the way that they do. That doesn't necessarily mean they're right either, but don't go into a conversation assuming that you're right. And when you do that, just by making that subtle energetic shift in how you approach a conversation, gives people so much space to feel heard and to feel appreciated and to feel valued, regardless of the situation.
One of the first things that I learned in leadership was that you will be 10 times more effective if the first thing that you do in any situation is to assume that everyone is operating with the best of intentions. Now, you could be proven wrong. There might be malicious intent. But if you at least start the conversation assuming that everybody is operating with the best of intentions, then you are in a more stable situation to respond to anything that proves to be out of alignment with that assumption. The second thing is that we want to seek to understand before coming in with constructive or corrective action. So asking, especially if you've already set the expectation, I demonstrated and asked you to do it this way, and you have done it this way. Can you explain to me why you did that? Now, with kids, this doesn't always work. I try this with my daughter all the time, and she just looks at me and is like, because you're like, so, but with adults, this should work.
Yeah, no parenting advice coming from me because I much prefer leading adults to leading children. But one thing that you said there, the key was like the ability to respond, right? Being a leader is a responsibility, and you have to have an ability to respond. When you're reactive, you are no longer in leadership status. Now you're a manager, now you're a boss. Nobody likes that. Nobody wants to work for a boss. A boss has a hierarchy. I'm above you, right? And so they're very reactive. When you're reactive, you are reacting the situation. And so if something terrible happens, a reaction of that is something terrible. So I give you a terrible reaction. I just said that word like 300 times in one sentence. But I want to drive it home that you are literally like acting it out. You are just now reacting it. And so the ability to respond is taking a moment, registering maybe I'm triggered, maybe something's going on in me, maybe this, brought up my own shit, but now I have a responsibility to support someone on my team, to support another living soul, another beautiful human being. And they might be triggered and there might be like big stuff going on. But in this moment, I have the opportunity to respond. And so sometimes you just got to take a minute, go to the bathroom, cry, shake it out. I love shaking it out. If your nervous system's all jacked up, shake it out and then approach the team member again from a space of safety. How can I help you? Why did this happen the way that it did? How can I support you best? And when people feel supported, you'll be so surprised at how well they perform.
Right? They'll either perform better or they will coach themselves out of the position. That's also a form of accountability. is the alignment of this is the expectation of what it looks like to succeed, not only in this position, but within this company. And we can lovingly hold people accountable to those expectations and have them not meet those expectations, but also not diminish their value and worth as a human. And there are lots of really great people out there who can, from a mobile bar perspective, bartend, but maybe they're just not a great fit for your company. That doesn't make them a lesser individual. They're just not a great fit for your vision and your company. You made the comparison of management versus leadership. And I love this reframe. You can manage systems, but you cannot manage people. You can lead people. And sometimes that means leading them right out the door. And that's okay, right? We're just looking for the very best talent for our company. But everybody has value. Everybody has value. And I think when you can embrace that as a leader, that's when magic starts to happen, because especially with new entrepreneurs and people who haven't been leading large teams or leading complicated teams, they may take everything personally. And so if someone's not doing something, it's because they don't respect them. It's because they have an attitude problem. And our only job is to put the right people in the right seats on the bus. And that's it. It's not personal. And so I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people over the years where it's like, you do this really, really well. But unfortunately, we don't need that here. And so it would be better for both parties if you were to go on and find a company in a position that could really enable you to thrive with your particular skill set. I would love for that to be us. It's just not. But then it doesn't become a personal thing, right? They're still safe being them. They just can't be them here.
People respect you so hard when you lead them to greater things. I think that as leaders, we get to create more leaders. The role of a leader is never to create more followers. We want to create more leaders. And sometimes the best thing that a leader can do is support you in really taking ownership and leading in your own life. And especially for entrepreneurs, and even bartenders to an extent, they're very entrepreneurial in that, like, they don't want to work a 9 to 5. They've chosen a totally different career path because it's outside of the box, it's creative. They can create connection and all those juicy, delicious things. And so when you're dealing with people who have an entrepreneurial spirit, oftentimes the very best thing you can do is support them in taking the lead role in their own life. Like you said, that might not mean that, and people know this. Like, you don't have conversations, hopefully you're not having conversations where people are oblivious to their performance, because you've been tracking it, you've set the expectations, you've communicated them clearly, you've given feedback, you've followed up, you've done all the things. Again, in-depth lessons on this in the academy. You've done all the things to set them up for success, and now you're both face to face. They know that they're not succeeding, you know that they're not succeeding, and they're used to having honest conversations. So at this stage in the relationship, because you have that trust, they feel supported. Even though you're having an offboarding conversation, they feel supported in their next venture because you see something in them that doesn't quite fit into the box that you've created. And we love that. We want people to break the mold. Unfortunately, for this particular business, I need you to stay in the mold. And because you're not well suited for that, I want you to take your genius and soar. Go somewhere else and do something amazing, because here's just not the place. And people, I have so many people who have great respect for our relationship because I've coached them out of their current situations or their current positions.
And we can largely minimize these difficult conversations with a super solid screening process and application process, so that we can be very clear about the type of people who will succeed and the type of people who will benefit the most from working within the company and the position in which we place them. But that's a podcast and a lesson for another day. But as far as we wanted to cover here, we really wanted to create a conversation around what does it look like to support systems of accountability. How do we keep the team aligned? How do we keep the people that work for us invested? How do we build and nurture a culture of autonomy, responsibility, respect, all of those things that enable us to spend time leading people, not hiring and managing and training. And I think that the topics that we discussed today are a good entry level overview of what we've seen to be successful in our own leadership journeys. And if people are interested in learning more about how to set up these systems of accountability, accountability is a big topic. How to reward employees. There's so many things that we could talk about here. But if people are interested in hearing more and learning more, we have great things. Not only do we have the Exceed program wherein we go in depth on all this, but we are also in the process of creating more leadership containers for more advanced mobile bar owners who have different issues than, figuring out how to hire bartenders, but now might have teams of a dozen, 20, 50 people that they then have to manage and lead and hold accountable. And so if people are looking for resources on how to be a stronger leader and not from a, boss babe perspective, then stick around and reach out, even because we have plenty more on the horizon on those topics.
Yeah, I'm currently building out a portion of this program for the Exceed members. And it is really vast because we recognize that people at that next stage of business, it's not just about hiring bartenders. It's about having a team, having people that you can trust to run events across town while you're doing something else across town. And that multi-unit management, that distance leadership requires a very specific skill set. And so, like you said, we are in the process of creating what is for me just like the ultimate passion project, full of resources and opportunities for people to learn more about leadership. Again, not from a boss babe perspective, but from like really authentic, true leadership. And so I'm excited for the creation of this thing. And like you said, if you guys are interested, please reach out, because this is something that we love, love, love to do. And we would love to support you in this next iteration of your business and in team building and delegation and accountability.
Yeah, that's a great place to end.
And that wraps up today's episode. I hope it was valuable. I would love to hear from you what you thought. You can drop me a line at hello@mobilebevpros.com or find me on Instagram at mobilebevpros. If you're looking for more valuable mobile bar related content, we have a website full of it. You can find us at www.mobilebevpros.com. And I'd love to see you in our Facebook community, also by the name of, you guessed it, Mobile Bev Pros. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, cheers.